Betting.
Betting on you. I'm betting on you.
This is KTN News.
Evening to you on this Monday, the last Monday of the month of October. This is the big story. My name is Michelle Ngele Odhiambo. Now tonight, Parliament is fast losing public confidence as a major cog in the wheel of the anti-corruption war chariot. Now this year alone, at least 6 members of the august House have been charged in court with corruption-related charges, some even running into hundreds of millions of shillings. Besides the court cases, allegations have been rife that legislators or their private companies are key architects of mega scams that cost the taxpayer billions of shillings. Interestingly, this scandal involving members of parliament or their companies are often related to procurement and supply, the very sector in government that saw senior officers in government sent on compulsory leave and subjected to vetting. By September this year, nearly 500 of the over 1,000 procurement and accounting officers had been cleared to go back to work. But the unfolding events have seen members of parliament sleeping in police cells before they secure their freedom through cash bail. The turn of events by all means has left Parliament with very little credibility, if at all, in the war on corruption. Ironically, MPs take the lead role in shouting from the rooftops when a mega scandal is unearthed. Mid this year, the President was categorical about what would befall those members of Parliament.
Siasa duni ya kugawanya watu, siasa ya kutumia kabila lako kujitetea na wewe ni mwizi. Wewe ni mwizi na utafungwa na utalala jela. Hakuna story ingine kutoka leo.
On the short night, I shall be speaking to 2 governance experts, Alex Manyasi and Steve Ogutu. But before we can hear from them, as usual, our lead reporter, Sophia Onuna, spoke to a former public accounts chairman, I beg your pardon, Omingo Magara, and our reports on the same. Sophia, good evening.
Good evening. So tonight on the big story, we are focusing on the legislature and whether they're playing their rightful oversight role, or have they become part of the problem when it comes to investigations into graft, abuse of office. We've seen several probes being undertaken, the various committees, whether it's a National Assembly or the Senate, but what comes out of it? And so focus on the parliamentarians. And joining me to talk a little bit more about this is former South Mugirango Member of Parliament, Omingo Magara. He also once chaired the Public Accounts Committee. Thank you for making time for us. There is a growing concern that this is one of the mandates of Parliament, to oversight. And we see members inviting individuals, the public servants, to inquire on various matters. But there's only so much that comes out of that at the end of the day. Are you satisfied?
Sophie, thank you, first of all, to give me an opportunity to share with you my experiences. Of course, an Article 1 of the Constitution of Kenya, the supreme power rests with the people. It can be exercised by the people themselves or through their representatives, in which case the legislator has been donated powers to by the public to actually legislate, represent, and oversee on their behalf.
Right.
Unfortunately, I think there's a bit of disquiet that is growing, and let's not pretend there's a bit of an issue because graft must be fought by all arms of government, including the parliamentarians who are my former colleagues. But the only unfortunate thing is sometimes we have not seen proper results, and there is no, somebody has not been reprimanded, and we have not seen action of, say, who is culpable. And at the end of it, sometimes you have seen members of parliament even disagreeing upon themselves because each one side is sitting on the other side, and the other side is sitting on the other side. And therefore, there's no commonality of thought. And I cannot say it is about the parliamentarians. It's about the vice that keeps fighting back. We cannot pretend that they are not tempted. The issue is, can you stand? Are you a man of character to stand the trials? And if you don't stand, unfortunately, that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. Even during our time, we used to have questions being asked for money. Questions for money. So somebody tables a question on parastatal, and he's not in Parliament today. He's sharing the same cup of tea with somebody else elsewhere in the big hotel. The same CEO he was trying to question. So I think the mandate parliamentarians are given by the public is really an onerous task. Then that's why we call them honorable members. You have been given some mouth to speak for Wanjiku Nanjala, who cannot speak. Now you have a choice to either speak on behalf of the people given the mandate or chew on their behalf. Your case is as good as mine. What's happening?
Talk to us about when you are chair of the Public Accounts Committee, when you're investigating matters. Did anyone ever approach you to go slow, to stop or sabotage an investigation?
Certainly. I remember the case of Anglo Leasing, which is not dying, because it was founded on truth and facts. And Anglo Leasing, until the matter is completely put to rest, it will never die. And you find advances. And you say, which is the bigger crime? Are you going to eat on behalf of that poor woman who walks bare feet? Basically, I remember it's a case where I was approaching somebody says, that one, you did go slow. I said, if you have an issue, can I please invite you to go and give evidence in the committee? Politely you are telling them, I am not in business. And that's why that's the first time we saw ministers resigning due to Anglo Leasing scandal. And I can tell you, truth be told, facts will never be distorted. And I like giving an analogy that is factual. You cannot, keep a sweet in your mouth and speak as freely as we are doing between me and you. Someone, even if he doesn't see you, the kind of sound you produce will suggest somebody is having something in his mouth that tells you you are chewing on behalf of the Kenyans. And Kenyans are bright. They have seen, they know. And that's why you hear a bit of questions as why are we actually being properly represented. And we are fighting about graft at the top level. I want to tell you, Sophie, too, that the county levels, we have the steepest of the rot. In some counties, without mentioning names, they have not even, the county assembly members have not been able to produce one public council committee report. They're supposed to oversee. What are they overseeing in the 5 years?
Right. Let's talk about some of the things you've said, because you've said Kenyans are not fools. We see these things play out. For instance, the sugar report, the probe into the same, it happened, 2 joint committees. We saw people summoned. At one point, even the speaker admonishing the members of parliament for what he called kissing and hugging of witnesses appearing. And then their final report is tabled, and it was changed overnight. Some of their recommendations had been altered. And now, to date, that has now gone. What Kenyans had hoped answers would have been sought and accountability, we have that no more. How do we fix this?
Frankly, it's just a crime against humanity. And I'll tell you for a fact, somebody was talked to in those reports, and somebody was basically listened to somebody, and he played the game. So again, as I said, you cannot do a clear job if you have an excess baggage on your shoulders. That's why you must make a choice. And indeed, in terms of honorability, you must answer to that call, for heaven's sake, because that donated power is so supreme and that's why members of parliament are extremely powerful, because they have the people's mandate. How you use it is questionable. And the Kenyans are watching. We are keeping on asking the president to do something, and I really support the president's efforts to do this. But it cannot be single-handedly. Even my personal, Mingo Magara, I must give an input. Am I trying to tell people it's also immoral to bribe? Imagine 50 shillings with a traffic policeman costs 54 lives. And let me say this, Sophie, and I'm sure Kenyans are watching. How much can you eat? Your stomach is this size. And basically what you are saying, the 50 shillings you're serving your children, they're curses you're taking home. And you must demonize corruption and theft and call it by its own name. Calling corruption is actually a mild thing. It's theft that carries curses, if not with you, with your generation. The church must also walk in. I'm worried that we don't see it quite often, because the pastors and the richest persons are the ones, we are the flock. Are they reprimanding us? They're not. And if they're not, what are they doing? If I bring a big sadaka to church, it's a welcome thing. And sometimes they say amen. Now you wonder, amen means you go and do the same thing and bring more.
Let's talk about whether this function, oversight, should be stripped off Parliament, this probative role they play when they invite people to investigate them. Because on one hand, one would argue, even at the end of these investigations and when they probe the reports, they still have to be taken for further action to investigative agencies. So that in cases where these matters have already been seized by DCI, ODPP, EACC, then what is the point? Should they be stripped of this role?
You know, the Constitution also gives people public participation in terms of engaging on how they want their matters to be run. For example, public participation also includes the public being given an opportunity to even share a platform by the room where investigations are being done. How easy is it to access Parliament to listen to the hearings? They used to be live, which is also kind of a deterrent feature. If you actually make it live, it means therefore the temptations are small, it's lower, and even some extra advanced, the justice can only tell. The thing is, again, apparently us as electorates, we also take responsibility. Who are we putting in office? I don't think changing laws can. It's a question of moral attitude change. If we change our morality, and let it start from the generation, because I'm sure this vice has grown deep into our society. We need to change a paradigm shift and a generational change. Let's teach values in our schools and let's elect people who can give us value.
But this is so entrenched, many would feel, Mheshimiwa, that at this point we are far too deep in, that something else must happen.
I can tell you, Sophie, I'm never a quitter. I keep talking about it, I will speak about it, I support the president's endeavors, but collectively, we must do a bit. Let's not lament. You know, somebody never went to any job to earn money. He gives you 50 bob to elect him to come to Parliament for 5 years. And I can tell you, and I keep saying this, between my constituency South Mugrango and Nairobi, there is no baptismal class that I go through to a church to convert me from a thief that people know I am into a holy person. So we are actually sleeping on a bed that we have laid ourselves. I want to see a different attitude where people will look at issues, an issue-based person, not necessarily a pocket-heavy man, who will continue entrenching himself for purpose of posterity, and you impoverish you. Some monies, corruption is all over. Some monies that politicians use is drug money. And they're the ones who access power by killing our own children. We must say it for whatever it is, and however hard-hitting it is, all of us collectively responsible. But our parliamentarians, I want to encourage them to at least stand on high moral ground and carry the title of honorability and do their things right. Most of them are my friends. Perhaps maybe because about the numbers, I don't know. And Kenyans must speak also if the referendum was supposed to come. I'm not sure where it's coming, because again, these are about political interest. If the changes must be done, you cannot deprive members of their powers now as they are. The Constitution gives them the powers of three functions they do. If you want to change it, perhaps in the Constitution. But if we have to live with this, we must live with it by actually starting by doing the right ballot in the box.
Yeah. Finally, because it does not escape one's eye to, on one hand, hear a member of Parliament go to Bunge and very vocally articulate an issue and, say, even accuse several individuals, and then all of a sudden they discard that and move away. Would you say corruption is entrenched in our legislators, that our members of Parliament, the senators, are the biggest impediment in the war against graft? And as you answer that, please tie it in for me with, we have committees in the Senate, committees in the National Assembly, sometimes taking over investigative of issues at the same time. Why not merge? Isn't this duplication, wasting taxpayers' money, and with no results anywhere at the end of the day?
Several good questions. So let me say this. Sometimes you've seen committees from both sides of the House, the Senate and National Assembly, giving us different recommendations. Just like you go to church and you are preached to and you are converted, somebody who spoke with vibrancy has been talked to. In Swahili we say ameguzwa na akaguzika. So he was touched and he responded to the kind of that request, and he has started change tune. And basically, we would be better placed if we could do this thing like an open debate, where people can even, if public are given enough time. Sometimes an investigation that supposed to take about 2 or 3 months, where people can also give in reports of what they know about the kind of theft which they are seeing, is done in a week or two. And perhaps in Mombasa, for example. Yeah. Now, really, how can the public person from Western who are suffering from the sugar, the scam against the sugar, go to Mombasa? What we are saying here is a duplication is there. It is not because it is not deliberate. You know, I want to get a place where I can now speak, and if there's a chance of being talked to, I can be talked to. But I don't want to blame members of parliament wholesale. I'm sure there are good creatures out there. Very good people. Unfortunately, the environment we work in is all polluted. I want to encourage them. The temptations are there, but what I persuade them is, look at that poor woman who goes angry. Her children are going to school, and yours are in the beautiful schools. It's a question of morality. And I can tell you, we can legislate as much as we want to legislate. Unless we touch the moral conscience of our people, this war is tough to fight. But again, as I told you, Uru should not quit. He has my support 100%, and I hope we can all join up in hands to support him.
All right. Very well said. Thank you so much for making time for us. Omingo Magara, former South Mugirango Member of Parliament, saying that he has confidence and is encouraging those who perhaps were former colleagues and now parliamentarians to consider Wanjiku and, of course, their moral compass to guide in ensuring that at the end of the day, that oversight role they have, very important, is carried out in accordance to the law. Back to you.
All right, thank you, Sophia, our lead reporter there. We're now going to look at some of those members of parliament who have been implicated in the graft scandals in the recent past, and some of those who have been charged in court this year alone. We begin with the very latest, that is Lugari Member of Parliament Ayub Savula, currently being charged of 122 million shillings in advert fraud. The status of the case so far is that it is an active case in court. He is out on a 2 million shilling bail. We also have Nandi Hills, a Member of Parliament, Alfred Keter. He was arrested on February earlier this year with charges of multiple counts related to forgery of 633 million shillings of treasury bills. It is an active case in court, although Alfred Keter was released on bond. Again, another case, they're running into hundreds of millions of shillings, even bigger. Kibwezi West, a Member of Parliament, Patrick Musimba, there was also another one. His case, he was arrested there on August 23rd, 2018. Several charges on him, misuse of CDF funds as well as graft there. It is an active case in court, but I beg your pardon, the Kibwezi Member of Parliament, Patrick Musimba, was charged with stealing 1.1 billion shillings from Chase Bank, and it is still an active case in court. In that case, they're running into billions of shillings. We also have Embakasi North, a Member of Parliament, James Gakuya, arrested on the 23rd of August this year. He was charged with graft and misuse of CDF funds, another case that is still active in court. Remember, these are members of Parliament who've already been charged in court. We also have Sirisia, Member of Parliament, John Waluke. He was arrested also in August this year. Many of them arrested between August and September as we saw the revival of the war against graft. He was charged particularly with corruption allegations in relation to a tender supply of 40,000 tons. That is in 2004 there. He is out on bail, but the case is still active in court. And last but not least, this year alone in Nakuru Town West, Member of Parliament Samuel Arama, arrested in June of this year with the charges of illegal acquisition of land. Again, he is out on bond, but the case is active in court. And remember, those are just some of the members of Parliament implicated in these graft scandals this year alone. On the show tonight, I have two governance experts, Alex Manyasi and Steve Ogutu. Gentlemen, many thanks for joining us on the big story tonight. I'd like to begin with the conversation that our lead reporter Sophia Onuna had with the former chair of the Public Accounts Committee, Omingo Magara, and the allegations of graft coming, not only from Kenyans themselves, but from people who've served, in Parliament, former members of Parliament. Alex, let me begin with you. What do you make of the fact that this year alone, 6 members of Parliament have been charged in court on graft-related allegations in the wake of President Uhuru Kenyatta's revived war on corruption? Does this make Parliament the weak link in this fight against corruption?
Thank you very much. Probably the comment I can make is that it's unfortunate that we are having members of Parliament actually dragged into court because of corruption-related issues. It's unfortunate, I say that, because these are the legislators. They're supposed to be honorable members, and so they're supposed to be holding themselves with high esteem when it comes to the public eye. Unfortunately, when we have that a member of Parliament is being taken to court for corruption, then we start wondering what is going on in society, because these are the people who are supposed to be role models. However, having said that, I think it's also important to realize that in every instance where a member of Parliament has been involved in corruption in any way, they have actually worked in cahoots with public servants. So for us to win the war on corruption in this country, the gatekeepers, in my view, are supposed to be public servants who are supposed to safeguard the finances that they are taking care of on behalf of Kenyans. These members of Parliament are actually working with them in terms of looking at what are the loopholes within the system. That's number one. Some of them are supplying air. We have seen some of them, and unfortunately, people have refused to steal thousands of money. They are now stealing millions and billions. Mm-hmm. So when, as a country, we are losing almost 700 billion shillings in every year to corruption, it's worrying, because at the end of the day, that is just money being stolen. We have not even talked about wastage. We have not talked about money that we lose on projects that don't make sense, that don't add value to Kenyans. And so the efforts to actually fight corruption in this country must be stepped up. If you look at the figures and the statistics in terms of our ranking, we are almost number 143 out of 180-something. Mm-hmm. So when we are only behind countries like Somalia, like Southern Sudan, like Zimbabwe, like Eritrea, what are we saying? We are only behind countries that are almost failed states. So that is a very sad place to be as a country. And we must start dealing with corruption and step up the fight against corruption. Some people have actually suggested that we need to probably say that corruption is a national disaster, and I almost agree.
And we'll get to that, because many would argue that we have stepped up the fight against corruption, but not much seems to be done. Steve, let me come to you. Kenya is currently in the midst of one of the worst episodes of corruption in history, from the NYS to the health sector to the agriculture sector, yet Kenya's parliament has not taken a decisive stand on any of these issues. Again, where does that leave Parliament and the public confidence of Kenyans on the same?
Wow, thanks for having me, Michelle. I think it's a very sad affair. I think I've said this before. I don't think there is any member of Parliament or any political leader in this country currently in office who can pass the Chapter 6 of our Constitution on leadership and integrity. All of them fall short of that chapter. And it's because of what we are seeing. Most of them are being involved in scandals. I mean, look at what's happening, like in the case of Ayub, the MP for Lugari. I mean, it's a very, very sad affair. And I think when you employ somebody to be your security or to guard your home, and what they do is they go ahead and steal in the daylight, and you just tolerate them, then it's going to grow worse. And I think what we need to do is actually, as a country, or the government need to actually start cracking whip on these people. They need to be investigated, and the DCI should be given very, very ample support, from all quarters. We need to see the criminal justice system in this country working, together to make certain that these leaders, are held accountable for the monies they're stealing from the public. I mean, it's like, right now it's like it is them against the public. It is the political class, the political elites against the public. They are stealing from the public, left, right, and center.
And it's a lot of money. Let me just interject there for a moment. It's a lot of money. I remember in 2016, the then chair of the Ethics and Anti-Corruption Commission, there, Philip Kinis, was saying that a third of Kenya's revenue is lost in corruption. But earlier on, you speak about making sure that these people are convicted. Are we talking about perhaps a constitution that has legal loopholes that allow corruption to continue? Let's take a look at Section 62, for example, of the Anti-Corruption and Economic Crimes Act. It states that a public officer or a state officer charged with corruption or an economic crime shall be suspended at half pay with effect from the date of the charge until the conclusion of the case. The same suspended public officer who is on half pay shall continue to receive the full amount of any allowances. So we're talking about state officers implicated in corruption scandals, but possibly still having taxpayers pay for their allowances. I mean, is this the constitution that will take us to the war against graft?
I don't think the problem is really our constitution. You know, I mean, Kenya's constitution has been lauded as one of the best constitutions in Africa, right, you know, and probably one of the best in the world. I think what we have is, we need to go back to the basics. We have our moral fabric is really wanting. It's broken down, and I think some of these leaders, we need to learn to hold them accountable as citizens. I think even citizens themselves, we have ourselves to blame. You know, every 5 years we are given an opportunity to elect leaders who we feel can represent our needs, you know, and address some of these pressing needs we go through as citizens, you know. But what we do is, because we are so much used to being lured with money, you know, and voting along tribal and ethnic lines, I mean, it's making us to, you know, have leaders who are do not have the capacity to support, to help us meet our needs as citizens of this country. And so for me, I think it's about the morality and values that's broken down in this country. And I think going forward, what we need to see is actually, come 2022, I hope that the citizens of this country are learning, and we hope that they're going to elect leaders who truly have the right values and who can uphold the Chapter 6 of our Constitution.
All right. Let me just bring in Alex for a moment. I mean, it is obvious then that all our efforts to fight corruption will not bear fruit if we do not deal with the enablers of corruption. And not very long ago, National Assembly Speaker Justin Muturi himself castigated members of Parliament and committees for getting too scozy with scandalous persons of interest. And this has been brought up there by Omingo Magara. There's some of the ways or means in which corruption thrives in the in Parliament and the National Assembly, but there has been a precedent to this. In 1983, former President Daniel Arap Moi had issues holding on to power. There were talks of factions forming, in Parliament. So what he did then is dissolve Parliament, called for a snap general election, a decision that seemed to have worked for him at the time because he was able to create what many would call a user-friendly Parliament that suited his needs at the time. Should we perhaps, as Kenyans, look for the most opportune time to disband the 12th Parliament and have fresh leaders and a new look, really, as we fight corruption?
Thank you for that question. I'm not sure from where I sit whether dissolving Parliament is the solution in this case. I say that because, like I said initially, if you look at the members of Parliament who are allegedly stealing from the public, they're actually being aided to do the same by public servants. So it's a weird combination where it's not possible to steal unless you're using public servants to steal. So that tells you that we have different levels of looking at this. And one is that there are administrative loopholes within the system. For example, every government entity has an audit system within itself. For example, every ministry in this country has an audit department. So that audit department is supposed to safeguard the resources as they are used during that financial year. What the Auditor General gets is usually something that happens after expenditure has happened. So those are administrative things that can be handled at the ministry level or at the departmental level. Having said that, for example, those who are misusing CDF money, they are CDF managers, and ask anyone and they will tell you that CDF managers have become among the very rich people in this country using CDF money. How does that happen? It happens because they are the ones who collude with members of parliament to actually pass fictitious projects, pass projects that do not exist, spend money that was spent on air, and therefore, at the end of the day, members of parliament keep sharing this money. If you think about the systems, the way they work within government, you'll also realize that members of parliament, just like any other Kenyan, are also taking advantage of the fact that and you'll almost realize that either just before elections or during the change of regime is when corruption is highest. And for example, in this case, when President Uhuru will be retiring, if this war is not sustained, at the point when everybody knows that there will be one president exiting and there will be a totally new person coming in, corruption will tend to escalate. And the unfortunate bit is that the people who come into this space to actually steal money from Kenyans are the same people after that who run for political offices. One, to safeguard their interest in terms of the money they have stolen, or they come in at that point in time because they have so much money that they need to spend, and therefore the easiest way is to become an elected member of parliament or an MCA or a senator or a governor, for that matter. And secondly, having said that, I think it's important to also realize that one of the biggest disasters that ever happened to this country is for us to make elections so expensive such that where do you expect a prospective governor to get 200 million shillings plus to run for an election to become governor? It's not possible unless how many Kenyans can make that kind of money in a clean way and run for a campaign and actually succeed at the end of the day. So the way we have structured our electoral system is such that it makes it almost impossible for someone to successfully run for some of these offices, including the presidency, without having looked for money from different ways.
All right. And basically what you're saying, Alex, that we've institutionalized corruption so much that it's difficult to get away from it. We'll be continuing that conversation shortly. Governance expert Alex Manyasi. You also have Steve Ogutu in studio. Has Parliament lost public confidence in the fight against corruption? The conversation continues shortly on The Big Story. Stay with us.
This is KTN News.
Betting is the fastest growing biashara in Kenya. If you want to invest in a good biashara, open a betting shop today. Because many betting customers go to betting shops to chase out virtual game, sports betting, live betting, and more. Open betting shop yako wherever you are and celebrate the growth of your biashara.
Karibu betting.
Grow nasi.
Tukiwa magavana tumesema pia referendum watuogopi, lakini tunataka referendum ambaye itahakikisha kwamba pesa imekuja kwa mwananchi mashinani na itakuja kwa mwananchi mashinani kufanyia mwananchi kazi.
KTN Prime Highlights in association with KCB Bank.
Excitement as history is made after the first inaugural KQ flight touches down at the JF Kennedy International Airport in New York. Ugali meal to be expensive as the price of a 2-kilogram packet of unga set to increase by 25 shillings. Former Public Service Principal Secretary Lillian Omolo and 36 others charged afresh over the second NYS scandal.
We're dealing with students whose schools were demolished. We're also dealing with students whose schools were affected by the rain, right? And we're going to make sure that all of them sit their exams in alternative exam centers.
And over 1 million candidates to sit for their KCPE exams starting tomorrow.
Parenting, schooling, building, investing, saving, or maybe retiring.
Achieve your dreams with the KCB Gold Savings Account. Enjoy Kenya's highest earning interest rate by visiting any KCB branch today and opening a KCB Gold Savings Account. KCB Bank. Go ahead.
This is KTN News.
Welcome back to the big story on this short night. We speak to governance experts Alex Manyasi and Steve Ogutu on public confidence and Parliament. We are discussing the war against corruption. Steve, I'd like to begin with you once again. The bribery and corruption fiascos that have engulfed the 12th Parliament are a national shame, no doubt. But what resolute action can be done to redeem the image of both the institution and the country in matters of corruption?
I think these leaders have become a billboard of corruption, and it's not a good thing. And for me, I think there is one thing that the president had mentioned a few months ago about the lifestyle audit. I think for me that was a very noble idea to address corruption in this country, especially looking at those high-profile leaders we have in this country, including members of parliament. And I don't know where it disappeared to, but I'm hoping that that can be revived and we can have some of these leaders taken through this rigorous lifestyle audit exercise. So we can know really who are these leaders who are stealing from the public, you know, because we are really losing a lot as a country. I was reading a report the other day, I think yesterday, by the Auditor General, you know, on money that has been lost just from the western, the counties in the western part of Kenya, close to 6.5 billion, 6.2 billion, you know, and that is a lot of money. That is just the western part of Kenya. You know, what about the other parts of the country? And that is just at the county level. And so I think the country is hurting, and the president must be supported in his efforts toward addressing corruption. The EACC must step up its game, and they must work very closely with the DPP and the DCI office. And like I'd mentioned before, the entire criminal justice system must work together and speak the same language, so that these guys can be brought to justice. What they're doing is actually killing this country.
Right.
Because what happens when you steal money, say, from NYS that is supposed to create employment for the youth of this country? I mean, you're making a lot of young people go jobless, and they get into crime, and they're shot dead, and so a generation is just fading away like that, and that is not a good thing. So I hope that this can be addressed in a very sober way. And again, if the president really wants to achieve his Big Four agenda, then for me, I think, and this has been said by many other Kenyans, the best way to achieve the Big Four agenda is actually by tackling corruption. Because, say, for example, the Big Four agenda, I mean, the housing agenda alone, the budget allocation for it is about 600 billion every year, you know, and that is the amount of money we lose to corruption every year. So imagine what that kind of money can do if those loopholes are sealed and leaders conduct their duties with a lot of integrity and that kind of thing.
All right, that's one way. Steve, let's hear from you, because earlier on, you mentioned public servants are the same people aiding the corruption by senior, government officials as well as members of parliament. So far, about 500 of more than 1,000 procurement and accounting officers have been cleared to go back to work after being subjected to vetting. It is a vetting process that began after the revival on the war against corruption. Is this a process you would be confident that would change the scape of corruption in the country?
It's a good step, but it's just a very small bit of those many steps that are supposed to be taken to address corruption. Like I've mentioned, that was targeting specifically the guys in the procurement departments in the public institutions. And a lot of corruption is happening actually in the MP offices, in the governors, in the counties, the governors' offices, coffers, and all that. So I think there's need to have a multi stakeholder approach to address this menace. Not just there's no single solution to this menace. We need to have a multi approach toward addressing corruption.
All right. Alex, let me hear from you. Earlier on, you were mentioning our rating in terms of corruption. Number 143, I believe, was the last number, when TI made that index. What lessons can Kenya learn from countries that have been ranked better than, like Denmark, for example?
I guess we have realized that we're actually doing very badly. Like I said, for us to be ranking only slightly ahead of countries that you can consider failed states is actually in itself a sorry state, so to speak. For the countries that have actually succeeded, they have made corruption extremely painful. That's number one. Secondly, they have made sure that the justice system is actually efficient, it's effective, justice is delivered as quickly as possible, because one of the things that keeps happening in this country is that someone is taken to court, they're out on bail, and then it takes another 7 years. So before even justice is served, it no longer makes sense. So the justice system must be relooked into. Secondly, fortunately, the EACC, the CEO is exiting. We need to take this opportunity to actually clean up the anti-corruption agency, because those are the people who, when corruption happens, for instance, and they take files and they do investigations and they deliberately, for instance, tamper with the evidence that is required, and then those files are taken to court through the DPP, and then those cases are lost, then it makes nonsense out of the whole process. So people have known how to buy themselves out of those processes by using the officials, and that's why I say that it's not possible to do any corruption in this country unless public servants are involved, because they're the ones who will do investigations, they're the ones who will handle those files, they're the ones who will make sure that they determine actually who ends up in court and whether that case is won or not. But largely, I think as the ultimate goal, one of the big four agenda items is actually manufacturing. In a country like Kenya, the biggest business doer, if I can use that word, is actually the government, because that is where the biggest spending is. The private sector is almost non-existent. So for those people who want to make big money, for example, if you want to make money, like I said, to become a governor in this country, and you want to make 200 million shillings to run, you can only do that if you're doing business with government. So you can't do that kind of business with the private sector and expect to make that kind of money. So we need to grow the economy so that we shift focus from people planning how to loot government to people actually doing genuine business out there and making genuine money. Because we have business people in this country who can actually successfully do business and succeed, but the economy has to grow. When we see figures like, for example, almost 65 or 60% of Nairobians, for instance, staying in the informal settlements, I would say that the reason why those people stay in the slums is because of what I call the push factors. What are the things that push them to live in the informal settlements? It's because they're earning 10,000 shillings in a month, they cannot sustain themselves, and that is the only place where they can live and walk to work and earn a living. So unless we grow the economy, we will still have scenarios where a politician or someone will have to make big money, pay these people during campaign time, if you can say so, literally, like distribute money so that they get to be elected, because we are dealing with an electorate that is poor. So when you have Kenyans who are suffering out there, the slightest opportunity they get, when a politician shows up or during campaign period, people actually line up to be given money. People line up to be given sugar. People line up to be given unga. So we are dealing with a country where, unless we sort out our economy, we largely need to rethink the way our country runs if we are to fight corruption and actually win it.
All right. Many thanks. That is Alex Manyasi there. Steve, your final comment very, very briefly. President Uhuru Kenyatta has been very categorical about what would befall state officers implicated in corruption. Still, that doesn't seem to have made corruption painful enough for them to engage in. What does that say about the executive and the legislature in terms of the war against corruption?
Well, I hope I didn't get you quite clear, but what I would like to say is I think what we need to see the president doing, or the executive doing, is actually the president must continue effecting what he started about the lifestyle audit. I think for me that is one of the long-lasting solutions to corruption in this country. Every public servant must be subjected to this kind of